Welcome to another episode of the Shadow Self: A Journey Within. Joanne Bassassi and I are excited to be back and to do another episode this month. We have a return guest. We're very excited to have an interview with us this evening. But first, I want to say hello to Joanne. Hi, Joanne. How are you?
Hi, Todd. How are you? I'm doing great. Glad the sun is out finally, and we had no rain today.
Yep, definitely. But we're supposed to be, getting some 75 to 80-degree weather this weekend, so I'm very excited about that.
Hopefully, it'll stick.
Yep, definitely. So I want to introduce our next guest. His name is Josh Trent. He is the founder of Wellness Force, discovering physical and emotional intelligence to help men and women live life well. Hi, Josh. How are you?
You guys, welcome. This is so fun. I'm happy to be back. I'm doing great.
Excellent. We're glad that you came back to have an interview with us again and have a good chat. But yeah. So Joanne, you want to start off?
I do. I'm going to jump right in. When Josh was with us last year for his interview, we talked a lot about the shadow self and how our upbringing has a lot to do with the shadow self and our words, our thoughts, and how we approach our wellness, our fitness, and how we have to own our own approach to our shadow self and how we open up with that. Since then, I've followed Josh regularly. He sends emails and he's gone on a lot of healing trips, gone inwards, and his approach is forgiveness. So I'm going to jump right in and ask Josh to share what prompted you, such a big word, such a big healing term, forgiveness. What brought that to the surface, Josh? Forgiveness. Can you share with our guests, our listeners?
Sure. So, I'm an etymology fanatic. I love the history of words. And I even think about, what does forgiveness really mean? Like, what's the definition of forgiveness? And it's a letting go of resentment. It's a letting go. Forgiveness is a letting go process, which is a skill set of its own. And there's a relief that happens. There's a reprieve when forgiveness is gifted to oneself. And so for me, the culmination of things that have occurred for my greatest growth in the past year have been really, really challenging because there was still a part of my shadow self that was holding on and was getting something out of being right instead of giving myself the gift of forgiveness. So I think it's interesting that people talk about health and wellness and energy and all of these different aspects. But you can have the best diet plan in the world. You can have the best workout. You can go to yoga on Saturday and get a smoothie with your friends. But if you're not choosing to forgive yourself, then you're going to wonder why you're exhausted, why you're angry, and why the subconscious mind, as Jung would say, is really ruling the conscious. And we're all calling it fate. So for me, this forgiveness process has unfolded through some very specific breathwork practice, deep healing journeys in breathwork, and also deep healing journeys in plant medicine and ayahuasca. And with the combination of those two, actually, this about a week ago, it culminated where I was sitting under a grandfather tree in the middle of nature. And I just sat down by the tree and I said, no matter what happens, I will not get up from this tree until I have some type of bubbling up of higher consciousness. In other words, I'm not going to stand up from the shade of this tree unless I give myself some type of introspection of how I can forgive. And the forgiveness was a promise that I had made to myself at the end of a plant medicine journey about 3 months ago at Rhythmia. And Rhythmia, for those of you who don't know, is a legal plant medicine facility where they serve ayahuasca, which is a deep healing tool where you go into an altered state of consciousness to go down to the subconscious and scrub out the forgiveness coals that are still lighting our lives on fire. And forgiveness for me has been a process. I'm still in the process, as we all are. It's just nobody wants to talk about it because it's not that sexy. Forgiveness isn't really that sexy. But I'm still on the path, and there's a lot of nuance we could explore around forgiveness.
I have a question for that. Like I was speaking with someone earlier because I was so excited about this interview, and they said, "Well, you can forgive, but you can't forget." And I said, "Okay, well that's a good way to look at things, but
Yeah.
if you can you elaborate?" And they said, "Well, sometimes you look at it that." One woman said, "Well, it's like a cancer. If you don't forgive, it's going to just eat away at you, and then
Yeah.
you're just going to be sicker and sicker." But then the other woman said, well, there's certain people that you just can't forgive, so you have to hold on to it. And
Mm.
I said, well, how is that though? How would you heal if you're hanging on to it? And so there was a very good conversation. So then the third woman was the one who said, well, you can forgive, but you don't have to forget. So like in that like in that scenario, how would you have approached them?
How would I approach the person who's saying that you can forgive, but you can't forget? You know what question I would ask them? I would say, how is that working for you? I
Oh,
would
good.
say, how is that working for you? And they would probably say, what do you mean? And I would say, well, does your belief, which is, by the way, a belief is just a program. We're all computers. We're half beast, half spirit. Like we have a mind. That mind is run on microelectricity and consciousness, whether you want to acknowledge consciousness being in the mind or in the body or in the ether, we're all just computer programs. So I would turn to that person that said, I can forgive, but some things can't ever be forgived because they're just unforgivable. And I would say, well, how is that working for you? How is that affecting your stress? How is that affecting your relationships? How is that affecting your physical health? How is this lack of forgiveness or the road being walked, which I understand is challenging to actually let go of forgiveness? How is your resistance to forgiveness showing up in your life? And I think that's where I'd start the conversation with them.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point to start with. Very good.
It's almost like you have to come to the point of a heart center of heart love to send out love to that person, because and for yourself, because if you hang on to that grudge or whatever, even though you can forgive them but you can't forget, you're still kind of holding on to it within yourself. So i
Yes.
i
And
always look at I always look at the heart love, heart love.
the heart love is an interesting concept, and I'm almost I may not be quoting this person perfectly, but I actually think it was Carrie Fisher. You guys know Carrie Fisher from Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think she was quoted as saying resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
Yeah.
So with resentment being held and resentment being a beverage that someone sips, one can only wonder how much is that poison hurting oneself. And let's go deeper, because in holding on to resentment, somebody's still getting something. Joanne,
Mm-hmm.
like your friend that said some things are unforgivable, it's because they're still sipping on the nectar of being right. And so
Mm-hmm.
that person wants to be right and hold the grudge and harbor the anger and really poison the soul. I'm not saying it's easy to forgive. No one's saying it's easy. I mean, for some people, it can take years or decades. What I am saying is that at some point, we're all reaching a homeostatic ground zero. And at ground zero, all there is love. Everything else just gets in the way. So if we're all going to ground zero, how can I, as a conscious being, clear out my subconscious so that I can get to that homeostatic center where there is no such thing as resentment? There is no such thing as anger and judgment and being right. The only thing that's there is love. And I think that's the journey we're all on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not being attached to any kind of outcome or expectations.
Well, that's the hard one. How do we act in the accordance of love and on top of that, not have any expectations? That
Mm-hmm.
is a lifelong understanding. That's a lifelong embodiment process.
Yep, that's something I'm working on. So it is tough. It's challenging, but
And I've and having you refer it to being right, I guess I've never really heard forgiveness referred to also as being right. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting if you could elaborate, because it makes sense to me. People do keep hold that resentment and hold that like, well, I'm not going to forgive because they think they're right. And hearing
mm-hmm.
it from your perspective and hearing it like you say that, it makes so much sense. People do think, well, I'm right, so I'm not going to forgive.
Hmm. Man, this brings up a big reflection and inflection point for me, because I feel like we all operate in this TFA axis, thought, feeling, action. So we have a thought, which leads to a feeling, and then that produces an action. But you know what most people forget is below the TFA axis, there's the belief. And the
Mm-hmm.
belief is the thing that's formulated from 0 to 7 when we're children. The research is out. I mean, the majority of our beliefs, if you look at Dispenza's work or Bruce Lipton's work, the things that happen in our childhood, and they happen for us. I believe that now. the things that happen for us age 0 to 7, this is formulating how we're going to show up as an adult. And so what happens is we become these men and women that are guided by this subconscious belief pattern that instills the thought, feeling, action axis, this triangle of how we show up in the world. But the reality is that if we don't go down into the deep subconscious and clear out the beliefs that are fueling unhealthy body, unhealthy thoughts, unhealthy relationships, we really don't have a prayer. And that's why I think people call this waking up to how powerful we are before we came into the world and the things happen to us, which, by the way, I think those things happen to us to remind us how powerful we are, how
Yeah.
loving we are. Yet
Correct.
the challenge is people's resistance to that awareness. It's the resistance to awareness that we're powerful, we're loving, and we're all reaching that homeostatic zero where there's no resentment. It's our resistance to that. And guess who fuels the resistance is the ego. So, with the ego being in control, especially in our society now that's run by a maniacal human being who's fully in his ego, and also people that are listening, whether you are one side of the fence or not, we all can kind of feel an existential tension right now. We can all feel it.
Hmm.
And that feeling is there for a reason. It's because that feeling is being created by thoughts. That feeling is being created by the collective unconscious, the field, if you will. And those feelings and those thoughts that were separate, this divisional language of me too, the divisional language of me versus you, Republican versus Democrat, it's all a lie. It's all there to allow us to break through it so that we can see how powerful we are.
I believe that. I truly believe that. It's just we have to come back to the center that we're all the same. We
We
are
are all the
all
same. We're all sisters and brothers. It's the hippies had it right. They just didn't
yeah,
have the technology and the platform to speak it properly.
correct. I
Yeah.
I so believe that. And I do believe things happen to us to make us realize how strong we are. I do believe that. Todd and I can say that we had a lot happen this year.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody listening can go, "Oh yes, I've had a lot of things happen for me." And it's
Yeah.
interesting because when something can be reframed, look, no one's saying that when you lose a child, when you lose a wife, when you lose a limb, when crazy things happen. I mean, there's no way to explain why pain and suffering happens other than to say, this has happened. I'm aware that it's happened. And how can I see this as happening for me? And that right there is going to sting people because they're going
Hmm.
to say in this moment, how could you possibly say that losing my child was happening for me? How could you say that? Because there's pain there, there's love there. But if we go deeper and if we go to where we were stabbed by adversity, and losing someone you care about is the ultimate stab. I mean, what hurts more than that, you know? But if we can go to that place and do our work to see it as happening for us instead of to us, well, then forgiveness can occur. And I don't think we ever have to forget, but we do get to forgive if we want to enjoy this physical space that we're all living in.
That I believe that to be true, and there is lessons to in it, and why or how and what comes from it, and why. I mean, I have a personal experience from that. I knew someone for a very short time that meant the world to me, and he died of a massive heart attack, and I didn't understand it at the time, and now I do. I learned so much from that person, and it guides me every day to help other people who go through it. And so now I was resentful and I was hurt, like why and how, and I didn't get to say goodbye. But now I realize that it didn't happen to me, it happened for me so I could go forward, and
Yeah.
I can figure it out, and I can help other people or talk to other people who might experience it. So I do understand that part. At the given moment, no, I didn't, but now I do. So that's funny that you picked that exact topic. So I can explain on that I do understand that topic.
Changing beliefs is hard, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
think
That
that,
was hard. It was real because I was really pissed when it happened.
yeah,
But now I do get it. I do understand it. And
beliefs about money, beliefs about society, beliefs about people, all these beliefs they're literally programs. It's funny, we're talking to each other through a software program, and we're talking to each other based on the programs, the belief programs that are stored in our bodies. So anyone that's listening or anyone that's absorbing this information, you're getting it through a download, right? As
Right.
Todd and Joanne and Josh's voice speak through the microphone, it's going into your ears, you're processing you, and it is taking it in, and then you're reflecting that based on your beliefs of what you think is true. And this is why podcasts are so powerful, because when you hear a podcast and somebody speaks truth into existence that resonates with your soul, it sticks to you. It activates that truth inside of you, and it makes you even more aware of how powerful you are. And these concepts of death and losing people and structuring our beliefs, they are so challenging to the ego. And
Hmm.
the challenge is, you guys, that we need the ego too. We need the ego just like we need each other. Nobody wants to have soup that has no seasoning. Well, the ego is the seasoning for our soup.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's a good analogy.
very good analogy because we do need a little bit of it. We really do.
Well, it's all in our perspective and how we look at things. Instead of saying, "Well, why me?" Well, okay, so how did this help me? Well, what can I learn from this?
What can I learn from
So,
this? I just had a conversation with Christine Hassler, who's a really powerful coach and speaker. And she was talking about this concept of the inner coach versus the ego. And she was mentioning that the ego is the thing that's frenetically looking for a result. And we see this on social media where the memes on social, good vibes only, seek the lesson, understand
yeah.
what's true, step into your powerful self. The power of choice is yours. And all these kind of, for lack of a better term, BS statements that don't meet people where they actually are. What meets people where they are is what she describes this concept of the inner coach. The inner coach is aware and is present with what is. The inner coach is not seeking an immediate result, an immediate reprieve. The inner coach is holding its hand up and asking the question, what can I learn from this? What can I actually learn from this?
Hmm.
And can I allow myself to take my time as I learn it? Or am I going to be in the ego seat and say, how can I spiritually bypass this lesson and understand how this happened for me so I can get onto my yoga class? Right? I mean, those are two lenses that we can see things happening for us through.
Yeah, it's all in perspective. Yep.
And especially you with forgiveness. I mean, you've taken basically a year-long journey with it. I mean, you really started right after we interviewed you. You
Yeah.
trekked off into the forest and the wilderness, and
Yeah.
we're like, where'd Josh go? And
Yeah.
then
It's
we
it's
started
really
getting,
interesting.
yeah, we started getting the emails, and I mean, just profound stuff. So I mean, you really took it like deep, deep,
It was
deep,
a
deep.
year ago that I came on the Shadow Self, and a year ago when I had come on, there was the deep healing work that I had done around my mother, and that deep healing work has bared fruit of not just forgiveness, but a lightness and a playfulness and an acceptance of my mother and just everything that I've created with her in our relationship now. And the thing that came up this year in my plant medicine journey, and I would suggest that if people are doing healing sessions, people are doing breath work, people are getting Reiki, people are doing this healing that goes deep down to the subconscious. If you are searching for a shortcut, there is a shortcut, but it's going to hurt because it's a lot faster. Anytime there's a shortcut when it comes to emotions, it's going to have a lot more struggle and a lot more pain, but the payoff is massive. And that's what happened to me at Rhythmia this year. This is my second year going back to Rhythmia. And this year, I had a deep awareness in the last night of ceremony that I had been holding on to resentment since I was 17 years old. I mean, I had
Wow.
literally been clutching this coal, wondering why I was exhausted, wondering why I couldn't trust people. And
Hmm.
the story really started, you guys, when I was 17 and I had formulated these beliefs that money causes pain and I can't trust people because childhood was very challenging. And I think we went over that on the last show, but something happened when I was 17 where my father found condoms in my dryer. And he turned to me one day and he said, "Are these your condoms?" And at that moment, I froze, like total deer in the headlights. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the emotional intelligence at that time to explain myself to him. And quite frankly, he didn't really have the emotional intelligence to receive it. And so what happened was is he went behind my back and told my girlfriend at the time that I was having sex with her daughter, which became a dagger in my heart. And I made a decision when I was 17 that not only could I live life on my own, I didn't need my father and I couldn't trust anyone, but I also made this subconscious belief at that time was sex is something that I should hide.
Mm.
And that hit the deepest because that
Hmm.
led me towards really the whole decade of my 20s abusing sexuality, having sex in
Mm,
secret, being motivated to by anger, by frustration, to find some kind of peace in sexual intercourse with women. But what people don't realize in any addiction is this way: it's feeding a hungry ghost. And when you
yep.
feed a hungry ghost, they're never satisfied.
Yes.
So in my early 30s is when I started to do my deep inner work. And it took literally, it's taken 8 years for this to surface. And I think my subconscious mind was so afraid of it, so afraid of this memory coming up because it didn't want to go through the pain, that it took me being pushed down to my deepest core through ayahuasca, through plant medicine, for that lesson to really come out. And so, quite frankly, what drove me to just recently last week to the forest that Joanne, you were mentioning, was I knew that something was coming. I just didn't know what it was. And I trusted myself to go to nature because nature is where all the answers are. People want
Hmm.
to go to therapy and people want to go figure out what's happening, but that's all head up. That's all neck up. Nature is the greatest reminder that we'll ever need. I mean, practicing the art of being is a skill set where the majority of our conclusions and our solutions will bubble up. And so there I was underneath the grandfather tree. And like we started this conversation, just I literally said out loud, I'm like, I am not getting up until I am ready to feel whatever's coming through. And it took a couple hours. And in that time, I started to cry and I started to feel these things. And so the very next day when I got home, I had a conversation with my father, and it was the most powerful conversation I think we've ever had. It was a 45-minute conversation. And I told him all the things, which there was a lot more details. But you know what he said after I told him like how I felt and how hurt I was and everything else? I said, and you know why I'm calling you dad is because I don't need to forgive you because I've forgiven myself for holding on to this for so long. And I know that you were doing the best you could. And I know that you were coming from a place of love. And I don't need you to do anything for me. And I don't want anything from you. I just called to tell you that I love you and I respect you. And it feels so good to forgive myself.
Wow.
And it was so emotional because he said, well, you know what? I guess I could have explained that to you differently. I guess I could have handled that differently. So that's kind of
Wow.
his way of apologizing without apologizing. But you know what, you
Yeah.
guys? The whole
Yeah.
gift of forgiveness, this is the piece that people don't understand and that's hard to conceptualize. The whole practice of forgiveness has nothing to do with receiving an apology. The entire practice of forgiveness has everything to do with letting go of the coal of shame and the coal of resentment that we've been holding on to. That's the gift. That's the practice of forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a guaranteed apology from the other party. Forgiveness is a gift that I get to unwrap in my lap when I choose, when I'm ready to stop being right.
Yes, exactly. Oh my God, that was perfectly well said. It has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with be myself and I.
Yes.
Hmm.
Forgiveness is for me. It's not for the other person, it's for me.
Yes, it's so true. That was so beautifully said. People think it has to do with the other person, and it doesn't. It really,
And
truly
don't get me
doesn't.
wrong, it's nice. It's nice when someone apologizes because we all want to be seen, right? We all want to have certainty. We all want to have safety and security, but that's the real gift of scaling the mountain of forgiveness is when you get to the top, it's still you. Like wherever you go, there you are. So having the expectation that somebody's going to say they're sorry and that's the motivation for forgiveness, well, the negative feedback loop will just continue to perpetuate because forgiveness
Hmm.
is a gift that is for the person, not for the other person.
And they can see you in different lights. They don't have to see you how you see yourself. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Nobody's going to see you how you see yourself, and because we all see people differently.
So what propelled you to do the plant medicine, Josh? What intrigued you by that?
Well, you know what happened is that Rhythmia reached out to me a year and a half ago, and I had already done different ceremonies because I knew that deep in my subconscious there were things that my mind didn't know how to let go of, and what pulled me to plant medicine was my soul. My soul is what
Ah.
is what interested me in plant medicine because my soul has been at war with my mind for the majority of my life. My heart and my soul have been at war with my mind, and a lot of us can relate to this. Where have you ever wanted something to happen so bad, but you just couldn't figure out how you could let go of something that was blocking you, whether
Hmm.
it's relationship or health goals or anything else? Well, it's because that moment when people feel and people understand from a heart perspective what's happening, It has nothing to do with the mind. The mind is where all of our problems actually stem from. If you look at kids, the heart of a child is what we're all trying to get to. We're all trying to embody that. And whether you believe
Yeah.
in Christianity or not, or whether you believe in plant medicine, or whether you believe in any type of religion, if you peel back the layers on most religions, and if you peel back the layers on what people are really doing when they go to a plant medicine ceremony, they're attempting to, with their deepest heart, trying to come to God, trying to come to higher intelligence with the heart of a child and a beginner's mind. This is what we're all trying to do. We're all in the process of coming back home, turning to what's true with the heart of a child and with the beginner's mind. I mean, what does that even mean, right? The heart of a child, if you look at children, they'll get in a fight and then 10 minutes later they'll hug, right? They're so good at that.
Yeah.
Adults, we struggle with that. We struggle with that because our egos have been fortified by failures and resentments of our past.
Hmm.
And so, what draws me and what draws a lot of people to plant medicine is the surrender and the return to the child's heart and the beginner's mind. And that's what drove me to plant medicine.
Very cool. That's an interesting concept. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes.
I love that. People tell me that. They'll say, you get pissed off and you'll get mad, and then you'll turn around and bake us cookies or ask us if we want lunch. We're still mad at you for yelling. And I'm like, well, I said what I had to say, and it's over now. And now
Yeah.
I want to know if you want to eat or you want some cookies. And they're like, well,
Mm,
what? And I'm like, so that's funny. I must have a
yes.
child's heart. I don't
You
know.
must have a child's heart. Yeah.
I'm over it. I said what I had to say. Now I'm done.
Yeah.
I love that explanation. Um, so now I do you. This is an odd question, but because like you said, we're never done with forgiveness. So what's your next track? Your next journey? Like you're always going somewhere. You're always into like something. Do you feel like you're going into another retreat or where's your next adventure?
My next adventure is the art of being.
Oh,
The
nice.
the art of being, and I'll describe what I mean by that. We're human beings. We come into this world to just be and to learn and to live. And I have let go of an incredible amount. And I'm in an industry, this conscious media industry, where I'm constantly showing up either in my most authentic self, like 100% me, or I'm showing up and I'll get triggered, or, maybe I don't want to be my authentic self, whatever it is. The art of being is when somebody's comfortable in their own skin. And the art of being has nothing to do with how we look or how our hair looks or what clothes we're wearing or how many followers we have or any of that stuff. Like none of that actually matters. The art of being is really just about being comfortable in one's skin and loving oneself. So the next journey for me is the deep work of being myself and the play and the fun and the joy of being myself,
Hmm.
balancing those two. It's so easy for people in development or in this podcasting world to constantly have Lady Liberty and the scale tilted to one side, where we're always going deep and we're always doing work and we're always going within. Well, anytime we're always doing something, we're missing out on the duality of life. So that's my next thing, Joanne, is to really just surrender to this art of being. And with the art of being is going to come all new lessons, because with this art of being is me being in a conscious committed relationship with a woman. I mean, that's what I'm calling in now, and I'm actually finally prepared for it, because of the work I've done.
That's gonna be fun. Oh,
That's gonna be fun.
yeah, that's gonna be good. That's gonna be fun. Um,
It's
now,
interesting
go ahead,
you
Todd.
talk about
Go
the.
ahead, Todd.
I'm sorry. It's interesting you mentioned about the conscious relationship. I just read an article not long ago that talked about that very thing, and it's such an interesting concept. It's about uplifting each other and supporting each other instead of being like attached to each other's hips. It's a total opposite of what we're used to being in a relationship. So that's interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, the timing's always perfect for most of us if we're open to it, right? I've found
Yep,
synchronicity to be coming up quite a bit lately.
yep, definitely. And I just read a quote earlier. It's interesting you brought up about being present. Mindfulness is being present without judgment in every moment.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah. That's so true. And
Yeah.
that's the practice. Look, I think most people are looking for a target. Like, oh, if I just formulate my beliefs and I go to Tony Robbins and I read the right books and I hear the podcast and everything else. You guys, I just want to tell you, like, there's no finish line. Like, there's no finish
Hmm.
line for this thing. So let's all just surrender to the fact that we're all going to the same place, which is the DEATH, right? We're all going there. And it's okay because that's the reminder of how we can show up in love here.
That's where we're the truth. That's where we're going.
Well, there's a one-way ticket, right? We're not coming
Right.
back, you know?
That's where we're going. And just that's just honesty. So let's just put it out there. Um, and I love how you just keep peeling the layers. Like you just keep doing the shadow work. And the reason why I say that is there's so many that feel that the shadow work is not important, that it's scary, it's dark. Why do we go there? It's what you said earlier in the segment that, like, oh, let's stay in the light, like, let's stay on the positive, let's keep the positive vibes. Like you said, every day in the social media, we see it on Instagram, we see it on Twitter, we see it on Facebook. But a penny has two faces. You have to have balance. So, like, if you don't really touch that dark side or work that shadow self, I think you said it when you were on before, you're just layering and layering and layering emotions that are never touched, or layering and layering and layering situations that are never looked at. Doors just are closing and windows are locked shut. So I love how you just peel those shadows, you just open those windows, open those doors, and you just keep going. Just keep going. You're like the Energizer Bunny. You just keep going. You just,
Well, thank you for saying that. But there's a huge part of me in that same vein that has been quite exhausted. So that's why you asked me, what's the next adventure? What's the next thing? It's the art of being. It's the winter season. Like, here we are, we're stepping into summer, but energetically, emotionally, if you look at the Native American spirit wheel, I'm in winter. I
oh,
don't, I've cleared my schedule for some time. I'm very focused on my health and well being right now because one thing when we're doing the deep work, when we're traveling, when we're trekking on the mountain, there also gets to be a time where we give ourselves the gift of rest. And so that's what I'm focused on now. The next adventure for me is how do I operate with all my responsibilities, with all the things that must be done in order for the dream that I'm building to continue to rise, and also, how do I learn how to do that from a place of rest in winter?
Hmm.
That's the biggest adventure right now.
oh, that's so important.
But sometimes when you're in that presence of just being, you have much more clarity
Right.
when you're quiet.
Right. That's
Todd
so
and I
true.
did that this winter. Todd and I both took a reprieve this winter. People are like, "Where are you guys?" We're like, "We're resting." We found
Hmm.
out a lot about ourselves. We
Yes.
rested.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Came back stronger. So yeah, it was pretty awesome. So, do you have any plans on writing a book? I think you should write a book, Josh.
I would love to write a book. If anybody listening who would like to support me in writing a book, if there's any publishers or there's any one of your networks, message me. I
Yeah,
would love to write a
definitely.
book, but I'll tell you what, I definitely don't want to write it on my own.
Why is that?
Well, because I think that if I can have a mirror of introspection from another party, that it could actually make me reflect on what's coming through me and what's coming out. So, and
That's
also
true.
like I'm in this season of winter, so it's going to get to be in a season where I'm more in spring. I'm more ready to have something come out of me like that.
That's pretty cool.
Todd, maybe if Laura's listening, we could put Laura in touch with him.
Yeah, definitely. Could do that. I have a friend who's a publisher, and she also works with people writing books. So that'd be kind of a cool connection.
Cool.
Yeah. So Josh, if anybody has any questions, if they want to reach out to you after listening to this podcast this evening, this great interview, how can they get a hold of you?
They can go to wellnessforce.com and they can listen to Wellness Force Radio. So if you just type in Wellness Force on Google, you'll be able to find me super easy.
Okay, and you're also on Facebook. You have a Facebook page as well,
Facebook
right?
and Instagram. Yeah.
Instagram. Okay, under Wellness Force.
Wellness Force.
Okay, great. I'll have that all in the show notes and how they can get a hold of you as well. So this has been a great interview. Thank you for sharing your reflection of the last year. It sounds like you've come a long way and done a lot of hard work. And we thank you for sharing that with us this evening.
And
Thank you for having me, you guys.
I highly recommend to follow Josh. It's been wonderful, and he does a lot of live videos on Instagram. They're fantastic. So I definitely recommend the listeners to follow him.
So we'll be keeping an eye on it, Josh, and listening to your podcast and reading all of the fun and exciting things that's to come. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joanne, Todd. You're welcome, and it was a pleasure.
All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Everyone, have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.